The billing alert arrived at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, flagging unauthorized access to client files I hadn't touched in weeks. I stared at my laptop screen in the dim light of my home office, the notification glowing against the darkness. Vincent Livingston, 42 years old, international arbitration partner at one of the largest global law firms with offices spanning 3 continents. Our U.S. headquarters in Manhattan handled complex cross-border disputes worth hundreds of millions. I'd built my reputation on precision and trust. The alert showed someone had accessed the Meridian Industries arbitration files at 1:43 a.m. The case involved a $340 million construction dispute in Southeast Asia. Only 3 people had authorization: myself, my associate, and our client intake specialist who'd been with the firm for 8 years. I pulled up the access logs. The entries showed a pattern I'd never noticed before: late-night file reviews, document downloads, client contact information exports, all time-stamped when the office was empty. My phone buzzed. Another alert. This time from our case management system. Someone had modified the Meridian client contact database. The changes were subtle: updated phone numbers, revised email addresses, altered billing contacts. I scrolled through months of logs. The pattern was consistent. Always between midnight and 4 a.m. Always on cases worth over $50 million. Always involving international clients who rarely visited our New York office. The modifications weren't random. They were surgical, precise. Someone was systematically redirecting client communications. I opened the Meridian file directory. The original retainer agreement showed a $2.8 million advance payment, but the current version in our billing system showed $2.3 million. A $500,000 discrepancy that should have triggered automatic compliance reviews. My hands moved across the keyboard, pulling up other major files. The Jakarta infrastructure case, the Singapore maritime dispute, the Hong Kong banking arbitration. Each showed the same pattern of late-night access and subtle modifications. The office felt different when I arrived at 6 a.m. I walked past the reception desk where our client intake specialist would arrive in 3 hours. Miles Kingsley had been my trusted colleague since I made partner. He'd helped me land the biggest cases of my career. He knew my work habits, my client relationships, my case strategies better than anyone. I sat in my office, staring at the access logs on my screen. The CRE was undeniable, but the implications were staggering. Someone had been systematically manipulating our most valuable client files for months. The elevator chimed. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. I minimized the screen and waited, my heart pounding against my ribs as the footsteps grew closer. The footsteps belonged to Arabella Kingsley, our senior paralegal. She knocked softly on my door frame, holding 2 coffee cups. "You're here early, Vincent." She set 1 cup on my desk. "Couldn't sleep either?" I studied her face for any sign of deception. Arabella had worked closely with Miles on client intake procedures for 3 years. "Just catching up on some files." She nodded and left. I waited until her footsteps faded before reopening the access logs. 3 months earlier, Miles had approached me with an opportunity that seemed too good to refuse. A potential merger with a London-based arbitration firm. The combined entity would handle disputes worth over $1 billion annually. Miles had presented detailed financial projections, client synergy analyses, and partnership restructuring plans. The merger would eliminate redundant positions, including mine. "It's just business, Vincent," he'd said over dinner at that expensive steakhouse on East 54th. "The London partners want a single point of contact for international arbitration, someone based there." I'd trusted him completely. Miles had been instrumental in securing the Meridian Energy contract, a $180 million arbitration case that had elevated my standing within the firm. He'd introduced me to the client's general counsel at a conference in Dubai. He'd helped prepare the initial strategy presentations. He'd even suggested the fee structure that landed us the retainer. Now I understood why. I pulled up the original Meridian contact information from our archived files. The general counsel's email address was different from what appeared in our current system. The phone numbers didn't match. Even the company's billing address had been subtly altered. Miles had been redirecting client communications to accounts he controlled. He was positioning himself as the primary contact for our most valuable international clients. When the merger completed, he'd take those relationships with him to London. I opened my desk drawer and retrieved the USB drive I kept for secure file transfers. The needed to be preserved before Miles arrived and potentially discovered my investigation. The download took 47 minutes. Every access log, every modified file, every altered contact record. I created a comprehensive timeline showing exactly when each change occurred and which user account made the modifications. At 8:15 a.m., I heard Miles's voice in the reception area. He was early today, unusual for someone who typically arrived after 9 a.m. I quickly closed all the investigative windows and opened a standard case file. "Morning, Vincent." Miles appeared in my doorway, impeccably dressed as always. His smile seemed forced. "Working on anything interesting?" "The Jakarta infrastructure case. The opposing counsel filed some last-minute discovery requests." He nodded, but his eyes scanned my desk. "Need any help with the client communications? I know those Indonesian executives can be difficult to reach." The offer felt like a test. "I've got it handled. Thanks, though." Miles lingered for another moment before heading to his office. I waited 10 minutes, then walked to the IT department on the 15th floor. Our systems administrator, Arabella Westbrook, looked up from her monitors. "What can I do for you, Vincent?" "I need to verify some access logs. There might be a security issue with one of our client databases." She pulled up the audit trails I'd already reviewed. "These look normal to me. Standard after-hours access for case preparation. Can you show me the IP addresses for these late-night sessions?" Her fingers moved across the keyboard. The results made my stomach drop. All the suspicious access came from Miles's home IP address, but the user credentials showed my login information. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "These logs show me accessing files from Miles's home network." Arabella frowned at the screen. "That's impossible unless someone cloned your credentials." I thought about the tech failure I'd experienced 2 months ago. My laptop had crashed during a critical deadline, and Miles had offered to help. He'd worked through the night, recreating exhibits and client presentations while I dealt with the hardware issues. "Can you check if anyone has accessed my user account from multiple locations simultaneously?" The search took several minutes. When the results appeared, the pattern was clear. On 17 different occasions, my credentials had been used from both my office computer and Miles's home network at the same time. "Someone definitely cloned your login," Arabella confirmed. "This is a serious security breach." I asked her to preserve all and restrict access to the audit logs. Then I returned to my office to plan my next move. The merger documents were stored in Miles's office safe. I needed to see the actual terms before confronting him. But first, I called our malpractice insurance carrier to report a potential claim. At 2 p.m., I received an email from the Meridian Energy General Counsel. The message was brief and devastating. "We've decided to terminate our relationship with your firm effective immediately. Our new counsel will contact you regarding file transfers." I immediately called the number listed in our current client database. It went to voicemail. Miles's voice, identifying himself as the lead counsel on the Meridian matter. The scope of his deception was breathtaking. He hadn't just stolen client information. He'd systematically positioned himself to take our most valuable relationships when he moved to London. The merger wasn't an opportunity. It was a carefully orchestrated theft. I spent the afternoon documenting every compromised client file. The total value exceeded $400 million in active arbitration cases. Miles had been planning this for at least 6 months, possibly longer. At 6 p.m., most of the office had emptied. I walked to Miles's office and found him packing files into bankers' boxes. "Going somewhere?" I asked. He looked up, no longer bothering to hide his intentions. "The London office wants me to start next month. Earlier than planned." "What about our clients, the cases we're handling together?" Miles straightened, his expression cold. "Those relationships were always mine, Vincent. I brought in the clients. I maintained the contacts. You just handled the legal work." The casual cruelty of his words hit harder than I'd expected. 3 years of partnership, of shared victories and late-night strategy sessions reduced to a simple transaction. "The Meridian retainer," I said. "Where's the missing 500,000? His face didn't change, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was deciding how much to admit. "Consulting fees," he said finally. "For business development services. Paid to whom? A London-based advisory firm. Everything was properly documented." I knew he was lying. The money had gone into accounts he controlled, funding his transition to the new firm while leaving our partnership to handle the malpractice exposure. "The merger documents," I continued. "I want to see them." Miles closed the banker's box and faced me directly. "The merger is happening with or without your cooperation, Vincent. The London partners have already approved the structure. Your position was always going to be eliminated. Because you made sure of it." He shrugged. "I positioned myself as the logical choice for the international arbitration practice. That's just good business." The admission hung between us like a blade. Miles had spent months systematically undermining my relationships with our most important clients, all while pretending to support the merger that would destroy my career. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day I realized you'd never have the vision to build something bigger than this provincial practice." The contempt in his voice was absolute. I understood then that our partnership had never been real. I'd been a useful tool, nothing more. "The other partners know?" "They'll understand when they see the financial projections. The London merger will triple our international revenue within 2 years. Miles picked up his box and walked toward the door. "I'll be in London by the end of the month. The transition documents are already prepared." He paused at the threshold. "You should consider this an opportunity, Vincent. Maybe it's time to find a practice that better suits your limitations." After he left, I sat alone in his empty office, staring at the safe he'd left open. Inside were copies of the merger agreements, client transfer documents, and financial records showing exactly how he diverted funds from our partnership accounts. The package was overwhelming. Miles Kingsley had systematically stolen our most valuable clients, manipulated our financial records, and orchestrated a merger designed to eliminate my position while enriching himself. But as I gathered the documents, I realized the betrayal went deeper than money or career advancement. He'd destroyed something I'd valued more than any case or client, the trust that made partnership possible. The question now was whether I could prove it before he disappeared to London with everything he'd stolen. The Legal Transactions Compliance Office occupied the 32nd floor of our building. I'd never been there before. Senior ethics consultant Monica Hill met me in a sterile conference room that smelled like fresh carpet and anxiety. "Mr. Livingston, these are serious allegations." She spread Miles's documents across the mahogany table. "Client diversion, financial manipulation, breach of fiduciary duty." This speaks for itself. Monica studied the merger agreements. "Mr. Kingsley filed these with our London office 6 weeks ago. He listed you as a willing participant in the transition. Check the signatures." She examined my supposed consent forms through a magnifying glass. "These appear to be digital reproductions of your signature from other documents." "Forgery." "That's a criminal matter." Monica made notes on her tablet. "I'll need to involve the state bar immediately." The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, Monica had frozen our partnership accounts and issued a temporary restraining order, preventing Miles from transferring any additional client files. The emergency partners meeting convened at 7 a.m. on Thursday. 12 senior partners sat around the conference table, their faces grim. Managing partner Arabella Kingsley, no relation to Miles despite the surname, called the session to order. "We have a situation that threatens the integrity of our entire international practice." She outlined Monica's preliminary findings. Client funds diverted through shell accounts, forged consent documents, unauthorized merger negotiations that would have cost the firm millions in lost revenue. "Where is Miles now?" asked corporate partner Arabella Whitmore. "Heathrow Airport," Monica replied. "He was detained this morning attempting to board a flight to London." The room fell silent. Miles had been caught with over $2 million in client funds transferred to accounts he controlled. The Cody was overwhelming. "Vincent, you've been remarkably restrained through this process," Arabella Kingsley said. "Most attorneys would have filed criminal charges immediately. I wanted the firm to handle it internally first. That was wise. But we can't protect him from the consequences of his actions." The State Bar investigation began the following week. I testified before a disciplinary panel about the systematic nature of Miles' deception. The hearing room was packed with attorneys from competing firms, all eager to witness the downfall of someone they'd considered untouchable. "Mr. Livingston, how long did you suspect your partner was manipulating client relationships?" asked the chief disciplinary counsel. "The billing discrepancies became obvious in March, but I trusted him to explain them." That trust was clearly misplaced. The panel reviewed bank records showing how Miles had gradually siphoned funds from our joint accounts. He'd created false billing entries, inflated expense reports, and diverted retainer payments to accounts he controlled exclusively. "The pattern suggests premeditation spanning at least 18 months, the counsel noted. Miles's attorney attempted a defense based on partnership dissolution procedures, arguing that his client had legitimate authority to negotiate the London merger. The panel wasn't convinced. "Forging your partner's signature constitutes fraud, regardless of business justification," the chief counsel ruled. The criminal charges followed within days. District attorney investigators seized Miles's computers, phones, and financial records. They discovered additional of wire fraud and money laundering that extended beyond our partnership. He was running similar schemes with at least 3 other attorneys, Detective Arabella Morrison explained during my deposition. "You weren't his only victim." The revelation was both vindicating and disturbing. Miles had built an entire practice around manipulating trust relationships for financial gain. The civil lawsuits began immediately. Our former clients filed claims seeking damages for the unauthorized transfer of their files. The firm's malpractice insurance covered most settlements, but the reputational damage was severe. "We're implementing new oversight procedures for all partnership agreements," Arabella Kingsley announced at the monthly partners meeting. "This can never happen again. I helped design the new protocols. Digital signatures would require biometric verification. Partnership account access would need dual authorization. Client file transfers would trigger automatic compliance reviews. You're essentially creating a system that assumes partners will betray each other," observed litigation partner Arabella Chen. "Because sometimes they do." The criminal trial lasted 3 weeks. Miles pleaded guilty to wire fraud, money laundering, and forgery charges. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution to his victims. "Mr. Kingsley, you violated the most fundamental principle of legal practice, the trust between partners," the judge said during sentencing. "Your actions have damaged not only your victims but the entire profession." Miles showed no emotion as the bailiff led him away. "I felt nothing watching him disappear through the courtroom doors. The anger had burned out months ago, replaced by something colder and more permanent." The State Bar's final ruling came 6 months later. Miles Kingsley was permanently disbarred and ordered to pay additional fines totaling $500,000. His name would be published in the State Bar Journal as a warning to other attorneys. "Justice served," Monica Hill said when she called with the news. But justice felt incomplete. The money could be recovered, the clients could be compensated, and the systems could be improved. The trust that had been destroyed couldn't be rebuilt so easily. I started helping other attorneys who'd experienced similar betrayals. The State Bar referred cases involving partnership disputes, and I found myself becoming an expert in professional misconduct investigations. "You have a unique perspective on these situations," Monica explained. "You understand both the legal and emotional dimensions of professional betrayal." The work was satisfying in ways I hadn't expected. Helping other attorneys navigate the aftermath of partnership disputes felt like turning my experience into something useful. But late at night, when the office was empty and the city lights stretched endlessly beyond my window, I still wondered how I'd missed the signs for so long. Miles had been planning my destruction for months while I'd trusted him completely. The partnership was over, the criminal case was closed, and the civil matters were settled. Yet something fundamental had changed in how I approached every professional relationship. Trust, I'd learned, was a luxury I could no longer afford. 18 months later, I stood in the conference room of my new practice in downtown Seattle. The view stretched across Elliott Bay, and the morning light felt different here, cleaner somehow. Vincent Livingston and Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of a glass tower that had been built the year before. 3 junior associates, 2 paralegals, and a case manager who'd followed me from the old firm. We specialized in international arbitration and professional ethics consulting. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Mr. Livingston, the Washington State Bar is on line 2, my assistant announced through the intercom. I'd been expecting the call. The Bar Association had asked me to lead a new initiative training law firm administrators on early detection of financial misconduct. The program would launch in 6 cities across the Pacific Northwest. "Vincent, we need someone with your background," the bar's ethics director had explained during our initial meeting. "You've seen how these schemes develop from the inside." The training materials were spread across my desk: case studies, warning signs, detection protocols. I'd spent weeks developing a curriculum that would help firms identify problems before they destroyed partnerships and careers. My phone buzzed with a text from Arabella Chen, my former paralegal who'd started her own legal consulting business in Portland. "Saw the news about your bar training program. Proud of you." The Seattle legal community had welcomed me with surprising warmth. Word had spread about what happened in San Francisco, but here it was viewed as experience rather than scandal. Partners at other firms sought my advice on partnership agreements and internal controls. "Trust but verify" had become my standard recommendation. And verify everything twice. The afternoon brought a meeting with potential clients, a technology company facing international patent disputes. As I reviewed their case materials, I found myself automatically checking timestamps, cross-referencing billing records, and verifying document authenticity. Old habits from a hard education. My new partners understood my caution. We'd built the firm with transparency as a core principle. Every financial transaction required dual approval. All case files were backed up to multiple secure servers. Partnership decisions were documented and voted on formally. "Paranoid," my junior partner had asked during our first month. "Careful," I'd corrected. The evening news played silently on the conference room television as I finished reviewing contracts. A brief segment showed Miles Kingsley being released from federal prison after serving 14 months. He looked older, thinner, and avoided the cameras as he walked toward a waiting car. I felt nothing watching him disappear into traffic. The criminal restitution had been paid in full. The civil settlements had been finalized. The state bar's disciplinary process had concluded with his permanent disbarment. The system had worked, eventually. But the real victory was quieter and more personal. I'd rebuilt my practice, my reputation, and my sense of purpose. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed my career had ultimately made me a better attorney. At 7:30, I locked the office and walked to my car. The Seattle streets were busy with evening commuters, and the city felt alive in ways San Francisco never had. This was home now. My phone rang as I reached the parking garage. Monica Hill's name appeared on the screen. "Vincent, I have a situation that might interest you," she said without preamble. "A firm in Denver is dealing with what looks like systematic client fund misappropriation. The managing partner specifically requested your involvement." "Send me the details," I said. "I'll review them tonight." The work continued. Other attorneys needed help navigating the aftermath of professional betrayal, and I'd found my calling in guiding them through the legal and emotional wreckage. I volunteered to train law firm HR staff on early misconduct signs, and each session reminded me how many warning signals I'd missed with Miles. But that knowledge had become my strength rather than my weakness. The drive home took me along the waterfront, where cargo ships moved slowly across the dark water. The city lights reflected off the bay, creating patterns that shifted with each wave. My apartment was quiet and orderly. No partnership disputes to worry about. No billing irregularities to investigate. No late-night calls about missing client funds. Just the peaceful silence of a life rebuilt on solid ground. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.